It's nice to be speaking to some of the folks out there again, and I was thinking that a lot of times people ask me, since I was the executive director of Focus on Renewal for over 40 years, how did we ever accomplish all the things that we accomplished? How did we develop the health center, the community center, the art center, the high rise, and all the things that we did? And of course, we had our failures too. We had a lot of failures, things that we couldn't accomplish that we wanted to accomplish. But the things that we did accomplish come, first of all, from the grace of God. You know, you don't do anything without that energy that comes from God and the help of a whole lot of volunteers and a whole lot of people. But the one word that I always like to use in talking about how we accomplish things was perseverance. Perseverance. And I guess I thought about that when I read the readings for today, May 15th readings, because the image of perseverance and the attitude of perseverance is so important in there. First of all, we have Paul and Barnabas are in Antioch today. Now, Paul traveled, they tell us, 10,000 miles in 4 missionary journeys to spread the word of Christ. And he was very successful in many, many ways. But he also had problems. You know, he gave us this passage from the 2 Corinthians, which I have a hard time memorizing, but let me read it for you today. It shows the challenges that he had to face as he persevered in doing the work that God gave him. Wrong page. 3 times, he says, I was beaten with rods. Once I was stoned. 3 times I was shipwrecked. I passed a night and a day on the deep. Frequent journeys and dangers from rivers, dangers from robbers, dangers from my own race, dangers from the Gentiles, dangers in the city, dangers in the wilderness. And he goes on and on and on. There's more. And so the idea of his successes is what we talk about and read about and thank God for these days. But the message is the reality that he had a lot of problems and had to work through a lot of things. He persevered. And then we have the book of Revelation. Now, Revelations is a very challenging book to read. It's almost a different language. It's written in apocalyptic language. But the message is real clear. And it was being written for the Christians who were being persecuted by Nero way back there in the first Christian century. And the message is that God will take away all the tears from your eyes. God will be there with you through the good days and the bad days. God is going to be with you forever. That was the message for the Christians so that they might persevere, that they could persevere. And of course they did, and many of them faced martyrdom and death. But they persevered in spreading the word of God. And the third big thing, of course, is Jesus. Now, we're back at the Last Supper with Jesus, and he's telling his friends how much he loved them and how his challenge was that they had to love one another. And you know that the apostles sometimes drove Jesus to distraction when he was working with them over those 3 years of his public life. They argued about who was going to be first. They disappointed him. They doubted him. They didn't know exactly what Jesus was all about, but he persevered. He loved them. And he says to them, I want you to persevere in loving one another, no matter what challenges come. Perseverance. So I always like to come down to that slogan, that passage, that simple phrase that I've said so often. God has called us not to be successful. We all have our failures in life. God has called us not to be successful. God has called us to be faithful in whatever vocation, in whatever walk of life we live. So perseverance, faithful to the call, faithful in loving God and loving each other.